The collision of worlds, Doctor. Archer Reed adjusted his silk tie in the reflection of his phone, frowning at the notification of another interview request. At 36, he'd become the unlikely face of modern astronomy after discovering what the media had dubbed Earth's twin, an exoplanet with conditions theoretically perfect for supporting life. The discovery had catapulted him from respected academic to scientific celebrity, complete with a best-selling book and regular appearances on morning talk shows. 5 minutes. Dr. Reed, his assistant called through the door of the green room. The auditorium is at capacity. Of course it was. Archer had grown accustomed to packed venues since his discovery. Tonight's lecture at Princeton was particularly important. The prestigious Hawking Medal would be awarded, and he was the unanimous favorite. When he stepped onto the stage, the applause was immediate and enthusiastic. Archer soaked it in, his confidence bordering on arrogance as he launched into his presentation. What we once considered impossible is now inevitable, he proclaimed, gesturing to the stunning visualization of his exoplanet behind him. My discovery has redefined our understanding of habitable worlds. The lecture proceeded perfectly until the Q&A session, when a soft-spoken graduate student asked a seemingly innocent question about his calculation methodology. Archer dismissed it with practiced charm, but the student persisted, pointing out a potential error in his published research. The room grew uncomfortably quiet as Archer fumbled through his response, becoming increasingly defensive. By the time he left the stage, the damage was done. The Hawking Medal went to his rival, Dr. Elena Vasquez, and Dr. Astrofraud was trending on Twitter before midnight. 3 days later, Archer's silver Audi sped down a rural highway. Putting distance between himself and the academic humiliation, his agent had suggested a strategic retreat until the controversy blew over. Go somewhere quiet, work on the new book, she'd advised. Give them someone else to cancel. Archer had chosen Starfield, the small Midwestern town where he'd grown up before his parents moved away, before MIT and Cambridge, before he'd learned that brilliance was a ticket out of places like this. No one would look for him here. The engine made an ominous sound as he passed the faded "Welcome to Starfield" sign. 5 miles later, it gave up completely, leaving him stranded outside an odd circular building with a domed roof. A hand-painted sign announced, "Starfield Planetarium and Wonder Emporium." Perfect, Archer muttered, grabbing his phone. No service. The planetarium door opened and a woman emerged, keys jangling in her hand. Even from a distance, Archer was struck by her presence. She moved with a kind of fluid grace, her dark hair swept up in a messy bun, with what appeared to be a pencil holding it in place. As she approached, he noticed her unusual eyes, a warm brown that seemed to shift to amber in the sunlight. "Car trouble?" she asked, her voice carrying a hint of an accent he couldn't place. "Something like that," Archer replied, his frustration evident. "Is there a mechanic in this town who isn't working with tools from the Stone Age?" The woman's eyebrow arched at his tone. "Gill's Auto is about a mile up the road. Only mechanic we've got, stone tools and all." She studied his car with surprising assessment. "Looks like your timing belt. Might take a few days to get the part." Archer ran a hand through his expertly styled hair. "A few days? That's not possible. I need to be back on the road immediately. The laws of physics and small-town supply chains don't particularly care about your schedule," she replied, amusement dancing in her eyes. "I'm Zinnia, by the way. Zinnia Moon." "Dr. Archer Reed," he responded automatically, waiting for the flicker of recognition his name usually evoked. It never came. Instead, Zinnia just nodded and said, "Well, Dr. Reed, unless you've got a spare timing belt in that designer luggage, you're stuck here for a bit. Need a ride to Gill's?" 30 minutes later, Archer sat in Gill's cluttered office receiving the grim confirmation. Parts would take at least 5 days to arrive. The motel across town had vacancy, a small miracle according to Gill, but it meant nearly a week in this backwater town with nothing to do. "Actually," Zinnia interjected, having lingered to chat with Gill about his daughter's science project, "I could use some help at the planetarium. Our summer program starts Monday and my assistant just left for college orientation." She turned to Archer. "You said you're a doctor. Any chance you know basic astronomy?" The question was so absurd that Archer nearly laughed aloud. He who had mapped previously unknown star systems and discovered an exoplanet, being asked if he knew basic astronomy. "I'm familiar with the subject," he managed, his tone dripping with condescension. "Great." Zinnia replied, either missing or ignoring his tone. It doesn't pay much, but it'll cover the motel and give you something to do while you're stranded. Archer opened his mouth to refuse to explain exactly who he was and why the suggestion was ridiculous, but something stopped him. The anonymity was unexpected but not unwelcome. Perhaps a few days of nobody knowing or caring about his celebrity or his recent humiliation might be exactly what he needed. Fine, he agreed reluctantly. When do I start? Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. Zinnia handed him a business card with the planetarium's address and her phone number. Wear comfortable shoes, and maybe lose the attitude. The kids respond better to enthusiasm than condescension. As she walked away, Archer found himself staring after her. There was something unusual about Zinnia Moon, something he couldn't quite identify. The way she moved, the strange accent he still couldn't place, those eyes that seemed to shift colors in different light. The motel room was exactly as depressing as Archer had anticipated. Faded wallpaper, a mattress that had seen better decades, and a television that probably predated his birth. As he unpacked the few items he'd brought for what was supposed to be a quick retreat to write, he found himself wondering about the planetarium and its unusual owner. Why would someone like Zinnia, clearly intelligent and perceptive, choose to run a small-town planetarium rather than pursue real opportunities elsewhere? And why had she so readily offered a job to a stranded stranger? The questions followed him into restless sleep, where his dreams were filled with shifting stars and eyes that changed from brown to amber to something else entirely, something that seemed to reflect the cosmos itself. Orbiting reluctantly, Archer arrived at the planetarium 5 minutes before 9, dressed in the most casual clothes he had packed, a button-down shirt and slacks that still cost more than what most people in Starfield probably made in a week. He found Zinnia already bustling around the lobby, arranging pamphlets and checking a peculiar old projector that looked handcrafted rather than manufactured. You came, she said, sounding genuinely surprised. I half expected you to hitch a ride out of town instead. My car is still being held hostage by your Stone Age mechanic, Archer reminded her. And I never back out of agreements. Zinnia handed him a faded blue t-shirt with Starfield Planetarium printed across the front and a cartoonish rocket ship beneath. Staff uniform, she explained, failing to hide her amusement at his visible horror. You're joking. The kids respond to visual consistency, she replied, completely serious. It helps them identify who they can ask questions. Reluctantly, Archer took the shirt and headed to the small bathroom to change. When he emerged, Zinnia was speaking with an elderly man who appeared to be setting up a snack stand in the corner of the lobby. Archer, this is Henry. He volunteers 3 days a week and makes the best popcorn in the county. Henry extended a weathered hand. So you're the stranded city fella Zinnia's taken in. She's got a soft spot for lost travelers. Before Archer could respond to this odd characterization, the front doors burst open and a wave of elementary school children flooded in, accompanied by 2 harried-looking teachers. The peaceful planetarium transformed instantly into a chaotic whirlwind of excited voices and boundless energy. Summer science camp, Zinnia explained, unfazed by the commotion. 30 kids ages 7 to 11. We're their field trip for the week. Archer felt a momentary panic. His experience with children was essentially non-existent. His lectures were given to doctoral candidates and fellow researchers, not sugar-fueled miniature humans with questionable attention spans. Just follow my lead, Zinnia said, correctly interpreting his expression. And remember, they're not looking for a doctoral dissertation. They want wonder. For the next 3 hours, Archer observed in amazement as Zinnia transformed the modest planetarium into a magical journey through the cosmos. Her presentation was scientifically accurate, but wrapped in storytelling that kept even the most restless children engaged. She spoke about stars as if they were old friends, describing their life cycles with genuine affection. Betelgeuse is like that one uncle at family reunions, she explained, pointing to the red supergiant. Loud, takes up a lot of space, and could explode at any moment. The children erupted in giggles, but Archer noticed they were all looking up at the star in question, absorbing real astronomical knowledge beneath the humor. After the main presentation, Zinnia directed the children to different activity stations. She assigned Archer to the telescope corner, where children could look through various instruments at detailed photos of celestial objects mounted on the distant wall. By the end of the day, Archer was exhausted but strangely satisfied. As the last children departed, he collapsed into a chair in the small staff room behind the main hall. "You survived," Zinnia noted, handing him a cup of tea. "And you didn't do half bad. That explanation of black holes using the cookie and tablecloth was actually pretty inspired. I have a PhD in astrophysics from MIT, he said before he could stop himself. I should be able to explain basic concepts to children." Zinnia paused, studying him with those unusual color-shifting eyes. "MIT, huh? So what brings a big-brain astrophysicist to our little town? We're not exactly on the cutting edge of cosmic discovery here." Archer hesitated, suddenly reluctant to reveal his true identity, and the embarrassment that had driven him into hiding. Just taking a break from academia. "Needed some perspective?" "Perspective is one thing we've got plenty of," Zinnia replied, gesturing toward the dome. "Nothing like the cosmos to remind you how small your problems really are." As they closed up the planetarium, Archer noticed a strange device in Zinnia's office that looked like a cross between a ham radio and something from a science fiction movie. Before he could ask about it, she quickly covered it with a cloth. "Private project," she explained with an enigmatic smile. "We all need our hobbies." Over the next few days, Archer fell into an unexpected rhythm. Mornings and afternoons at the planetarium with school groups, evenings spent at the small local diner, or walking through the surprisingly charming town square. Despite himself, he found the simplicity of Starfield soothing after the pressure cooker of academia and media attention. On his fourth day, while showing a teenager how to properly focus a telescope, Archer was interrupted by an excited gasp. "Oh my God, you're him. You're Dr. Archer Reed." The teen was practically bouncing. "I saw your TED Talk about exoplanet KR452b. I downloaded your paper on spectral analysis from Archer." Archer felt his stomach drop as heads turned their way. Zinnia, who had been helping another visitor, looked up with an expression of surprise. "You must be confusing me with someone else," Archer said quickly. "No way I'd recognize you anywhere. You're like my science hero." The teen fumbled for his phone. "Can I get a selfie?" Before Archer could respond, Zinnia smoothly intervened. "I think there's been a mix-up. This is Arthur Reed, our visiting educator, but I'm sure he'd be happy to talk astronomy with you after the presentation." The teen looked confused but allowed himself to be guided back to his group. When Archer glanced at Zinnia, her expression was unreadable, but something in her eyes had changed. A new awareness. A reassessment. That evening, after closing, she finally confronted him. "So Dr. Archer Reed, discoverer of Earth's twin and author of Beyond the Known, is slumming it at my little planetarium. Want to tell me why?" Archer sighed, the weight of his public humiliation returning. "How long have you known?" "Since your second day," she admitted. "Henry recognized you from your appearance on Good Morning America. We decided not to say anything. Figured you had your reasons for keeping quiet." "I made a mistake," Archer said after a moment. "A calculation error in my published research. It was pointed out very publicly at a prestigious lecture. Now my entire career is being scrutinized and my discovery might not be what I thought it was." Zinnia considered this. "Is that why you've been checking your phone constantly? Monitoring the fallout?" "My agent thinks it'll blow over if I lay low for a while. Academic scandals don't hold the public's attention for long." "And is that all you're worried about? The public's attention?" Her question carried a challenge. "What else should I be concerned with? Maybe whether your research is actually correct?" Zinnia suggested. "The truth seems more important than your reputation." The simplicity of her perspective caught Archer off guard. In his world, reputation and funding often overshadowed the purer pursuit of knowledge. Before he could respond, Zinnia was gathering her things, including a strange purple-tinted telescope he hadn't seen before. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Stargazing," she replied. "I go every night. There's a perfect spot on Miller's Hill with no light pollution." She paused at the door. "You're welcome to join, but fair warning, I like to observe in silence. No lectures required." Curiosity overrode Archer's initial inclination to refuse. He followed her to an ancient jeep parked behind the planetarium, and they drove in comfortable silence through the darkening town. Miller's Hill turned out to be a gentle rise on the outskirts of Starfield, far enough from the minimal light pollution to offer a stunning view of the night sky. Zinnia set up her unusual telescope with practiced efficiency, Up close, Archer could see it wasn't merely purple-tinted but seemed to be made from a material he didn't recognize, something that almost appeared to shift and respond to touch. That's not a standard telescope, he observed. Custom build? Family heirloom, she replied cryptically. It sees things others can't. As she adjusted the settings, Archer looked up at the vast expanse of stars overhead. Without city lights to dim them, they blazed with an intensity he rarely experienced. Despite his professional focus on the cosmos, he realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd simply looked up and appreciated the beauty of the night sky. There, Zinnia said suddenly, her gaze fixed on a specific section of sky, right where it should be. Archer followed her gaze but saw nothing unusual, just a relatively empty patch of sky with a few faint stars. Yet Zinnia was observing it with intense concentration, occasionally making small adjustments to her telescope. As the night deepened, Archer was surprised to find himself more fascinated by Zinnia than the stars. There was something in her focused observation, in the way she occasionally whispered words he couldn't quite catch, that suggested a deeper connection to the cosmos than mere scientific interest. When she thought he wasn't looking, he noticed her lips moving in what appeared to be conversation, though no sound reached his ears. Once, when she adjusted the telescope's positioning, he could have sworn her skin briefly took on a subtle purple hue in the starlight, but it must have been a trick of the darkness. They stayed on the hill for hours, long past the point when the evening chill should have driven them back to town. Zinnia remained transfixed by whatever she observed through her strange telescope, while Archer found himself caught between scientific curiosity and a growing personal fascination with this enigmatic woman. "We should head back," she finally said, reluctance evident in her voice. "The moon will rise soon and wash out the view." As they packed up her equipment, Archer made a decision. He would return tomorrow night after she left and see for himself what held her attention so completely. Despite his scientific skepticism, something told him Zinnia Moon harbored secrets that defied conventional explanation. Secrets that might be as fascinating as the stars themselves. Celestial revelations. The following evening, Archer made his excuses after helping close the planetarium, then drove the rental car he'd acquired back to his motel. Once certain that enough time had passed, he returned to Miller's Hill, parking some distance away to avoid detection. The night was particularly clear, with stars scattered across the darkness like diamond dust. As he crested the hill, he spotted Zinnia exactly where he expected, seated on a blanket, her unique telescope aimed at that same unremarkable section of sky. Concealing himself behind a large oak tree, Archer watched as she adjusted settings and occasionally made notes in a journal. What happened next challenged everything his scientific mind believed possible. Zinnia set aside her telescope and raised her hands toward the stars, palms upward in a gesture that seemed both reverent and familiar. Then she began to speak, not in any language Archer recognized, but in a melodic sequence of sounds that reminded him of wind through crystal or light dancing on water. The most extraordinary part wasn't her unusual speech, but what followed. The stars she addressed appeared to pulse in response, subtle shifts in luminosity that created patterns too regular to be natural stellar variation. It was as if she were conducting a conversation with the cosmos itself. When moonrise approached, Zinnia gathered her equipment as usual. But instead of heading to her jeep, she walked directly toward Archer's hiding place. "You can come out now, Dr. Reed," she called, no anger in her voice, merely resignation. "If you wanted to join me, you could have just asked." Embarrassed at being caught spying, Archer emerged from behind the tree. "What was that?" he demanded, scientific curiosity overriding social grace. "What language were you speaking? How did you make the stars respond like that?" Zinnia sighed, her eyes reflecting moonlight in a way that suddenly seemed too brilliant to be human. "I suppose this was inevitable. Come with me. I can't explain here." She led him not to the road but further up the hill to a small, hidden clearing surrounded by ancient oaks. In the center stood what appeared to be a miniature version of Stonehenge, with smooth stones arranged in a perfect circle. "What is this place?" Archer asked, his voice hushed despite himself. "A safe place to talk," Zinnia replied, placing her hands on one of the stones. It began to glow with a soft purple light, and the air within the circle seemed to shimmer slightly. "No electronic surveillance can penetrate this field." "Electronic surveillance?" Why would anyone? In the days that followed, Archer found himself living in two realities. During daylight hours, he continued helping at the planetarium, now viewing Zinnia's educational presentations through the lens of knowing she incorporated subtle truths from her own world. At night, they would meet at the stone circle where she answered his endless questions and occasionally demonstrated abilities that defied Earth physics. His fascination with astronomy, somewhat dulled by years of academic politics, blazed anew with childlike wonder. Each revelation from Zinnia opened doorways to possibilities he had never considered, challenging the foundations of his scientific understanding while simultaneously validating his lifelong belief that humanity was not alone in the cosmos. More surprising than this professional reawakening was the personal one. Archer found himself increasingly drawn to Zinnia, not just as a source of extraordinary knowledge, but as a person, or being, whose perspective and character he admired. Her genuine passion for sharing the wonders of space with small-town children, her wry humor, the way she saw beauty in simplicity that his success-driven life had taught him to overlook. On the 7th night after her revelation, they sat within the stone circle watching a meteor shower. The Perseids were particularly vibrant that year, streaking across the sky in brilliant arcs of light. "On my world," Zinnia said softly, "we have similar phenomena, but the meteors leave trails of color that remain for days, like cosmic brushstrokes across the sky." "I wish I could see it," Archer replied, his gaze fixed upward. "Perhaps someday you will." Her voice carried a note of something he hadn't heard before, a wistfulness, a possibility. When he turned to look at her, he found her watching him rather than the meteors. In the purple light from the stones, her true nature was visible. The subtle lavender hue of her skin, the star-like quality of her eyes. Yet these otherworldly features now seemed as familiar to him as his own reflection. "What?" he asked, suddenly self-conscious. "I'm trying to understand," she said thoughtfully, "how someone who has spent his life searching the stars for connection could be so disconnected from the people around him." The observation struck with uncomfortable precision. "My work required focus," he defended. "Relationships were distractions, were they? Or were they simply risks you weren't willing to take?" Her perception cut through his practiced excuses. "It's easier to search for life across the galaxy than to be vulnerable with the life forms right in front of you." "And you're an expert on human relationships?" he challenged, deflecting his discomfort. "I've observed humanity for 12 of your years," she reminded him. "And in that time, I've noticed that many of your species use achievement as a shield against intimacy. The more brilliant the mind, often the more guarded the heart." Before Archer could formulate a response, a particularly brilliant meteor streaked overhead, casting momentary daylight across the clearing. In that flash of illumination, he saw Zinnia with perfect clarity, not as an alien being or a scientific marvel, but simply as someone who understood him better than anyone ever had. Without conscious thought, he leaned toward her. She met him halfway, their lips connecting in a kiss that felt simultaneously impossible and inevitable. The contact created a sensation Archer had never experienced, a warmth that spread from his lips through his entire body, as if every cell suddenly resonated at a new frequency. When they separated, tiny points of light danced in the air between them like miniature stars. "What is that?" he whispered, watching the light slowly fade. "Energy transfer," Zinnia explained, a hint of embarrassment in her voice. "It happens when my kind experiences strong emotion. I should have warned you." "It's beautiful," Archer said simply. Then after a pause, "Does this happen with everyone you kiss?" Her laughter was like wind chimes. "You're the first human I've kissed, Archer. This is as new to me as it is to you." The admission transformed the moment from merely extraordinary to genuinely intimate. Whatever was developing between them was unique, unprecedented for both their species. The scientific implications were staggering, but for perhaps the first time in his life, Archer found himself more interested in the emotional reality than the scientific one. Their newfound closeness was interrupted the following morning by a call from Archer's agent. "Sophie, where the hell have you been?" she demanded when he answered. "I've been trying to reach you for days." "Bad reception," he offered, which wasn't entirely untrue. The stone circle blocked all signals, and he'd been spending most of his time there with Zinnia. "Well, wherever you've been hiding, it worked out perfectly," Sophie continued. The calculation controversy has completely blown over. In fact, it's had the opposite effect. Your work is being cited more than ever as other researchers build on your findings. That's good news, Archer said cautiously. Better than good. Cosmic Channel wants to sign you for a 6-part documentary series about exoplanet discovery. 7 figures, Archer. They need you in Los Angeles next week to begin filming. The opportunity would have been a dream come true 3 weeks ago. Now Archer found himself oddly hesitant. I need some time to think about it. Think about what? This is exactly what we've been working toward. Sophie's exasperation was clear. Look, I've booked you on a flight tomorrow. Just get to Chicago and we'll sort out the details. After hanging up, Archer sat on the edge of his motel bed, conflicted. The documentary would restore his reputation completely and advance his career beyond what even he had envisioned. Yet the thought of leaving Starfield, of leaving Zinnia, created an unexpected hollow feeling in his chest. When he arrived at the planetarium, he found Zinnia in her office, her expression unusually serious. "What's wrong?" he asked. "I received a signal last night," she said quietly. "The alignment is approaching. A rare stellar configuration that creates a pathway between our worlds. It occurs only once every 70 Earth years." Understanding dawned slowly. "You're leaving." "I have to report back," she confirmed. "My mission was to observe until humanity reached certain developmental milestones in astronomical understanding. Your discovery of KR452b was the final confirmation. We're approaching a time when official contact might become possible. When?" The word came out more roughly than he intended. "The alignment begins in 5 days and lasts for approximately 3 hours. 5 days. Almost exactly when he was supposed to be in Los Angeles beginning his documentary. The universe, it seemed, had a cruel sense of timing. Before they could discuss further, Henry burst into the office, his usual calm demeanor replaced by obvious concern. "Zinnia, there's a government fellow asking questions at the diner. Says he's from some astronomy department, but Marge says his ID badge looked military. He's been asking about unusual star observations and mentioned the planetarium specifically." Zinnia's face paled, the subtle purple undertone becoming more visible with her distress. "Did he mention any names? Asked if we had any visiting astronomers or scientists in town recently?" Henry confirmed, glancing at Archer. "I played dumb, but he's showing your picture around." Zinnia moved quickly to her computer, typing a series of commands that brought up what appeared to be a surveillance feed of the town's main street. A black SUV with government plates was parked outside the diner. Dr. Malcolm Vega. She identified the man exiting the vehicle. "He's been investigating potential extraterrestrial presence for 15 years. He tracked unusual energy signatures from our communication sessions." She turned to Archer. "Your rival at Princeton, the one who received the medal instead of you, he's one of Vega's consultants." The implications clicked into place. "They traced the quantum fluctuations to Starfield. They're not looking for me because of the calculation controversy. They're looking for what I found here." "What we found," Zinnia corrected softly. Henry looked between them, confusion evident. "Someone want to tell me what's going on?" "Not now," Zinnia said, making a quick decision. "Henry, if anyone asks, you haven't seen either of us today. We were called away suddenly. Family emergency." As Henry left, still puzzled but trusting, Zinnia turned to Archer. "I need to move my departure timeline forward. If Vega finds the stone circle or my communication equipment, he'd confiscate everything and probably detain you for questioning," Archer finished. "Or worse." The severity of the situation hung between them. This wasn't just about their personal connection or even scientific discovery. It was potentially about Zinnia's freedom and safety. "I'll help you," Archer said without hesitation. "Whatever you need." "You should leave town," Zinnia countered. "Your career, your reputation. You have so much to lose by being involved in this." "I have more to lose by not being involved." The certainty in his voice surprised even him. They quickly gathered essential equipment and documents. Archer's phone rang again. Sophie, no doubt checking on his travel plans. He silenced it without answering. Outside, they could hear the distant sound of vehicles approaching the planetarium. Time was running out. Through the window, Archer spotted 2 black SUVs turning onto the road that led to their location.